Are you guys working for free now? Is that what's
Yeah,
happening?
yes, yeah, no money, no money. You can actually hire an agent, and we just go out there and do it pro
Yeah.
bono. Absolutely, yeah. That's the crazy thing. Probably the craziest thing that I heard was that all of a sudden we're going to be working for free or for half the price or something like that. So.
And welcome to a Wiser Retirement Podcast. We believe the best financial advice should always be conflict free. I'm your host, Casey Smith. Guiding you to financial freedom today is my co host, Tom Townsend. Tom is a local realtor and has been a guest on our podcast many times. Hey, Tom, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
So, Tom, what's happening in the world of Keller Williams?
Keller Williams, yeah, we're continuing to be the number one agent in the local area here, nationally and in the Southeast. So things are great. We measure that by agent count, number of transactions, and actually overall volume. So in those three categories, we are just moving forward, and things are going well.
So I want to start off with I guess what's happening with this national realtor decision. Basically, are you guys working for free now? Is that what's
Yeah,
happening?
yes, yeah, no money, no money. You can actually hire an agent. We just go out there and do it pro
Yeah.
bono. Absolutely, yeah. That's the crazy thing. Probably the craziest thing that I heard was that all of a sudden we're going to be working for free or for half the price or something like that. So that's
So so is help me understand this. It's the National Realtor Association. Is that right?
National
Is that
Association of Realtors,
now? Okay,
NAR.
National Association of Realtors. They were sued. Is that correct?
Correct. Along with all many of the larger brokerages. So they were all kind of bundled together in this huge lawsuit that came out of Missouri from the
Okay.
homeowners. It was started with homeowners.
Basically, is it over like saying there's monopoly and the 6% shouldn't be 6%, or what was the premise of the lawsuit? Do you know?
Well, the premise was that it was a clouded conversation. There was no transparency of what these fees and the commissions really were and where they were coming from and who was paying for what and what the definitions of the commissions were. So that's kind of where it was born from. And I think people need to understand every state runs a little bit differently. So in the state of Missouri, the the way that they operated, from what I understand, and I'm still trying to get my hands on a lot of this stuff, but from what I understand, the state of Missouri worked a little bit differently than like Georgia. Georgia, believe it or not, we're really ahead of the curve as far as how we communicate to the general public of what commissions are, where they're at, who pays what, and what they are. And they're all negotiable.
Mhm.
But supposedly in Missouri, people thought it was a fixed fee. There wasn't any negotiating going on, and it was very clouded on where these commissions came from and who was paying.
So you're saying in Georgia, someone could walk up to you and say, "Hey, I want you to sell this for me, but I'm not going to pay you six. I'm going to pay you two." Is that what you're saying?
Well, you always could do that. It's always been negotiable. But yeah, I mean, if you've got a house that you want to sell, you could call me up and we could sit down and you say, listen, I don't want to pay your standard or your typical fee of 6%. I want two. Now I've got the right to say, I have to justify that. I got to show my value and
Yeah.
explain to you, and then I have to make a decision on if I want to move forward with you or not from a business
Yeah.
standpoint.
I mean, I feel like on the lower end of homes, let's say $500,000 or less, you're probably not going to drop your rate. But if you go up market and let's say the house is 3 million, I guess there's less buyers, so you have to have maybe a different network of buyer potentially. But you use 6% on 3.5 million. Now to be clear, you're not getting six. That's usually split between two agents, right? And then a little bit
Typically,
goes
yes.
to and so you get three, right? And then
Typically.
but then does one or how much actually goes back to Keller Williams or the broker?
Okay, so let me kind of break this down. And this is where a
Yeah,
lot of the confusion is.
yeah,
So, as a listing agent, if I'm coming to you and you have a $3 million piece of property, you and I are having a conversation of what fee you will be paying Keller Williams, because I work for Keller Williams.
Right.
Let's just use 6%. It's negotiable. All right, Casey,
Okay.
it's
Well,
negotiable.
six
But let's say
percent
we,
is kind of the standard. That's what we think it's
correct,
just going to be, right?
correct. Then the second half of that conversation is going to be, this is what Keller Williams is going to be taking from that 6% and providing to a cooperative broker to bring us a buyer. But that 6% is paid through your
Yeah. Right. You're paying the full
receipts from the
six.
sale. Yep.
Yep.
And it is a relationship. It is a negotiating between you and Keller Williams as a listing agent, not you and the buyer's broker.
Correct.
Okay. That is between Keller Williams and whoever brings you the cooperative broker.
Right.
That's how it works right now. Right now, that's how it works. And then we can talk about what that split is. If Keller Williams is providing 3% or maybe 2% of it or 1 or whatever it happens to be. That's very transparent. And we, as between Keller Williams and you, the seller, are going to have that conversation. And that's all going to be written up in the listing agreement.
But it doesn't go further than that, in that what percentage does my friend Tom actually put in his pocket?
Well, that's between Tom and Keller Williams, right? So I have fees that I pay into Keller Williams, and it depends on if we have a cap and so on and so forth. But primarily 15% of most agents, if they're at a certain volume of business, about 15% of that's going to flow back to Keller Williams, the local Keller Williams office, which is a franchise. And then that franchise has a fee to corporate.
To corporate.
Correct.
A lot of fingers in the pie.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, and I say that 15%. That's kind of an average. It all is based on the volume that your actual business does.
Yeah.
So that fluctuates a little bit. We basically have a cap every year.
So then, if I was selling a lake lot somewhere with no structure on it, that seems to be 10%.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
that's driven by the market.
That's just because what people are willing to pay on a lot.
That's right. Now, I think a lot of that was born from the fact that a lake lot can be very expensive. So there may be a little bit of negotiating there. But if you just take a random acre out in the middle of Timbuktu, maybe it's $8,000. That's why it's higher, right?
Yeah.
Because 3% on it, it's just not a lot of money, and not a lot of agents are going to be putting the time, effort, and energy into that.
Let's flip the conversation around a minute. Let's say you found a broker, instead of paying them 6, they're willing to do 4. So I'm assuming if a broker is willing to do 4, they're really hungry for the business, which means that they might give you maybe a little more attention initially to try to get some interest, but it also means they probably have less experience. They probably don't have as big of a network to reach out on that property. So it really depends on the property too, because some houses you could put a for sale sign up written in a piece of paper on the front lawn and it'll be sold in a couple hours because it's location. But most properties aren't that way. Most properties have to be found. They need to be listed in the MLS. People need to be able to find them on Zillow or Realtor.com, something like that. So obviously there's a benefit to paying that percentage. I think if you're a buyer, there is no reason why you wouldn't be using a real estate agent if you're a buyer.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, it's not costing you anything. The other side's paying for that.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
Especially if you're new to an area. If you're going somewhere for the first time, you don't know much about the area. You probably want to know where the best investment is, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what I always tell folks that are searching in the area, and maybe they're not that familiar with it, is listen, the internet's great. Zillow, all of those platforms are wonderful, but they're only going to get you up to a certain point. And then you're going to have to engage with a local agent. That all of a sudden get a little bit more granular, explain to you the different locations, the nuances of the area, and get you to the finish line. So once again, the platforms are great. You can find a house and, oh, I want to see this one and I want to see that one. I'm interested in that. But you've got to engage an agent to get you to the finish line, especially in this market where things are moving so quickly. A lot of times people will call us up and say, hey, I want to see 123 Main Street. I saw it on Zillow, and I'm telling you, it's already gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too late.
That's a good segue. You think it's a buyer's market still or a seller's market?
Market.
Seller's market still versus buyer's market.
Yeah, it's still a seller's market primarily. We are starting to see a little bit of a shift in the higher price points. Now I'm talking local here. We're talking about the Atlanta metro area. Mm-hmm. 3 million and above is starting to shift more to a buyer's market. So we're starting to see indications that is more of a buyer's market. But anything below $3 million is still a seller's market. Especially if you have a really nice property and in that sweet spot, you get anything at $300,000 to $450,000. It is definitely a seller's market. We're still getting multiple offers in that whole segment.
Yeah, I struggle with that with these new employees we're bringing on out of college. It's like a starter home in Marietta right now is going to run you about $500,000 to $600,000, and that's insane. I did my own search for, sure you can pick up a condo for $300,000 or something. It doesn't exist. If you find something for $300,000, you better jump on it inside the 30060 zip code for sure, or even 30064. But if you go north, there are some options, but it's not as it's not as nice as it was 5 years ago for sure.
We've definitely got an affordability issue, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. It really doesn't. We have a lot of
I think if the Feds can't get inflation under control, and inflation keeps going up, then stocks will keep up for a while, but ultimately your best investment is going to be some type of income generating property. That's the only thing I can think of that's going to be able to keep up with this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We did a study. We went back and looked at appreciation over the last 10 years. Now, I did this for Cherokee County, but all the other surrounding counties are very, very similar. We follow the same patterns.
Right.
So the last 10 years, the average annual appreciation of residential real estate has been 9%. Every single year over the last. That is unsustainable, number one. But that is crazy. If you bought a property 10 years ago, you're looking great right now. You're looking pretty if you've been holding on to real estate over the last 10 years in this area.
Are you curious why annuities keep coming up as a potential investment option? People are often told that annuities can effectively mitigate investment risks and help secure their financial future. However, annuities often benefit the salesperson and might not be the best choice for you as a consumer. To learn more about the various types of annuities, the negatives of owning them, and better investment alternatives, we have a free ebook on our website just for you. To download our ebook, Buyer Beware, Why Do They Keep Trying to Sell You That Annuity? Simply click the link in the episode notes or visit wiserinvestor.com/guides. Now let's get back to the episode.
But you look at places even down at the beach, like I look at Hilton Head at St. Simons all the time. Those homes have gone through the roof. But quite honestly, if I was going to, a lot of people think real estate's high and they're going to overpay. My opinion is if you're going to buy a house and put renters in traditionally, I think there's some risk there on the downside in the short term. But if you're going to buy something, if you buy a condo or a house near the beach that you can put in a rental program, to me that makes sense because you're able to set the nightly rate and even use it yourself to build legacy, things like that. But I just think that over the next 10 years, I'm not gonna say you couldn't go wrong. It's very property specific, right?
It is.
You could buy one house in a neighborhood and lose your shirt, and where the house down the street could have been just fine. So it's very property specific.
It is.
Think about, Tom, if interest rates did lower and you could get a 5% 30-year mortgage. What do you think would happen if
It's going to
tomorrow?
be, you're going to have buyers coming out of the woodwork, dude.
Yeah,
And I just,
and if that happens, what happens to home prices?
they go through the roof.
Yeah, which
I mean, look
creates
at
a
it
whole
right
nother.
now. I mean, the number of transactions that are occurring right now. We're on pace about what we did last year, but last year nationally we were off 32% or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's way, way down. So you throw more buyers into the mix and more demand. It's just that value is just going to be continue to have that upward pressure on it. So yeah, that we've been talking about that. Listen, these rates drop.
Which creates a whole nother problem though, because now you have inflation that those numbers get into the CPI, right?
Yes.
So then you're going to have a whole nother inflation problem. The whole market pullback this year has recently in the last few weeks has really been, okay, what's inflation doing? And maybe the Feds can't lower rates as the way the market thought they could in January. And I just don't think that they can, or at least they'll have to do other programs that don't lower interest rates for mortgages for sure. Because I just think it is just their fire's still burning, and I think we'd just be putting gasoline on it. And I don't. It's not that it's bad that the home prices are going up, but it's just you just run into affordability issues.
Well, we already have an affordability issue, and that's the one thing that I continue to look at, and I'm just shaking my head. I mean, what is the income to mortgage payment ratio that you consult with folks on? I mean, what
Yeah, I
percentage
mean,
would that
typically you
typically
say
be?
you don't want your payment being more than 25%.
Exactly. So where are
Yeah,
we? Do you know where we're at right now? 41
41. Oh,
nationally.
that's the norm
Or no,
nationally.
that's the Atlanta area. We're at 41%.
So
If
people
you
are
were to
paying
take
41% of their income is going to their mortgage.
Correct. If you were to
That's
buy a
crazy.
house today, an average price home today, putting
Yeah,
20% down, taking a 30-year fixed mortgage on it, you're 41% based off of the average income that we have, which is like around $70,000 a year. So
yeah.
that's
I would argue if you're
creeping up.
making, I would argue if you're making 70 grand a year, you're not buying a house right now.
Well, that's why they're not. And here we go. You're not.
Yeah, your household income's got to be probably north of 200,000.
Well, that gets you back into that 25%
Yeah,
ratio that
the
you were just
ratio,
talking about.
or the ability to save the down payment. Now there are programs. I'm sure you've seen them. What 3%, 5%?
Yeah, they're out there. They help a little bit to shrink that gap a little bit, but that's a
Yeah,
big gap that we're trying to close down. Going from where we're at, 41% down to 25, that's a
yeah.
big incentive. I mean, that's a lot of wherever that money comes from or a program, that's a
I mean,
lot.
for so many families, when we set like the family mission statement, it's to give their kids opportunities going forward. And
Yeah.
I think the assumption is that the kids would at least maintain the same lifestyle that they have now, and then they hope to propel them into the future. But no one really thinks about if you don't want your kid living in an apartment, then you're going to need probably to be able to gift $50 to $100,000 to help with that down payment.
Yeah. Yeah, and even so, even with that, we still have a mortgage payment that we have that
Yeah,
folks are
I'm
having a
assuming.
hard time digesting.
Yeah, I'm assuming that coming out of college, you got to be making anywhere from 55 to 75,000, and then after, well, yeah, I think in terms of business majors, I'm sure there's other majors that teachers aren't doing that, but but yeah, no, it's a tough nut. It's a
It
tough nut to
is.
crack, or you have to go. Where is a $300,000 house? Where is that?
Well, you could find one. Probably not anything you and I would want to go in, just being
Right?
honest. They're
Yeah.
going to be fixer uppers. They're going to need a lot of work.
Wait a minute.
You
There's
can
no
find
track
those
homes
out.
anymore at 300 grand. You know, the
Pardon?
houses that all look this. There's no more track homes at 300 grand. All the
No, you're
houses
not
look
getting
this.
any new builds at 300 unless you go way north. If you go up into like a Daresville and up
Oh wow.
into, up into those areas, there's some new
Yeah.
developments that are coming up and you can get into, I think I just sold one up there. I want to say it was in the low 300s. It's a starter house, but it was way up in Calhoun is where it was. It was up in
Oh, wow.
Calhoun, development up in Calhoun, Adairsville, those types of areas, little communities. There's some national builders that are starting to do some things up there, but they're still, I mean, they're 325 to start, I believe. I'd have to double
Yeah.
check that, but yeah, that's where you got to go. And so if you're working in the city or inside you got an hour and a half commute.
With no mass transit.
Oh, yes, yes, exactly. So, yeah, it's a struggle for
Well,
folks.
I mean, are there any particular trends that you're noticing right now in the real estate market?
Trends is, we have a lack of inventory. The resale market is got a lot of constraints because folks that do have a mortgage on their property that have been hanging on to it for at least 2 years, they have a 3% rate, correct? And they're having an awful hard time transferring that into a 7% rate. So they've made the financial decision to hang tight. We're not doing anything. We're not moving. We're not putting the house on the market. So I think we've talked about this in the past where people were 3-4 years ago, people were selling their house just because they wanted to move. Very little motivation was needed in order for you to sell your house and move. Now, today's market, the trend is you got to be highly motivated. You got to have a real reason to be putting that house on the market and moving. A job change, a life change of some sort. Something's got to be pretty motivating for you to do that. That's leading to a lack of inventory with the same, if not more, demand for housing, and it's put a lot of pressure on the housing market.
Have you?
So that's one of the trends that we see. New construction. My buyers, I talk to them about new construction right on day one. Have you considered new construction? And most of them are like, no, it's too expensive. And I'm like, listen, we're going to go look at new construction because that's where the inventory is, number one. Number two is that's where the incentives are. The builders are savvy enough where they can give a little bit of incentives from a financial standpoint. Most resale sellers don't for a variety of reasons. So anyways.
Have you seen a trend with these? I keep reading about these house hacking by young people where they're buying a house and they're renting out all the rooms in the house. Have you encountered any of that with any of your buyers?
Not a whole heck of a lot, but I talk about house hacking all the time. I would love for my young kids. I've got a young daughter. I keep on telling her, I said, you need to become a house hacker, but she wants, she wants a brand new house with everything done. I'm like, man, good luck.
So basically, you buy a house, I guess you fix it up a little bit, but then you get roommates. You charge them rent.
Yeah.
They're paying you,
Correct.
Essentially the mortgage, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit.
And then you either sell the house or do you buy another home? I'm not sure. I'm unclear as what happens after the
hacking itself.
Yeah, the
Well,
hacking
you
itself.
got a choice. You can either hang on to it and continue to live there and do what you're normally doing, or you can sell it and roll it over into something new.
Into something else. Interesting.
So you've got some tax advantages depending on how long you've held on to it. From a tax standpoint, you got to hang on to the property for a couple years. Otherwise, it's going to be capital gains.
Right.
So you got a little bit of maneuvering in there. You got to talk to an agent once again, an accountant once again, financial planner, to make sure that you don't get yourself into a tax liability there. But yeah, house hacking's been around forever and been pretty popular.
What do you think? What do you think is going to happen with the rest of 2024 when it comes to real estate?
I think we're gonna be in I think volume from a number of transactions are concerned. I think we're going to see a little uptick from last year. The rates went into effect late 2022. So last year's market was kind of in a shock. Anything new always has a shock period. It's starting to wear off. So we're going to see a little uptick with transactions this year. I don't think we're going anywhere with rates. Everybody was waiting for rates to come down. I don't see it, especially with the latest. Can you hear that dog in the back?
Yeah, we're this is a dog friendly podcast, so we're
okay.
good.
All right,
We
good.
love dogs.
But I don't see anything happening with rates. I think they're going to hold steady, especially with the new numbers with inflation coming out. I just don't think the Fed's going to do anything to stoke that fire any further. Values, I think we're going to continue to see an increase in values. What is it going to increase? I don't think we're going to see that 9% trend that we've seen over the last 10 years. Last year, depending on what report you look at, was anywhere from 3 to 5% increase in values in last year. And last year was it was a rough year. This year, we're starting to see that starting to tick up again. So maybe 5%, 6%, we may see that this year. And believe me, we're trying to do everything we can to like calm that down, because it's just, I didn't think it was going to get to this point as far as a affordability issue. I didn't think we would get this far, as far as that gap in between people's income and mortgage payments. I just didn't think it was going to be sustainable, but here we are. So,
Well, more and more people are moving to this area, so that doesn't really help us when you don't have enough housing supply
yeah.
demand.
Yes, we've got a lot of people moving into this area. That's, it's wonderful to have the economic base that we have here in the Atlanta area. However, it comes with a lot of strain on the real estate market and housing.
Well, what advice would you give to a buyer or a seller right now?
For buyers, I would say, first of all, get yourself a great agent. You're going to need them in order to get you to the closing table. This is not something you can do on your own. You can find the house on Zillow. You can find it out there. But if you want to get to the finish line, you've got to engage an agent sooner than later, number one. Number two is get ready to compete. This is not a down market. It is still a seller's market. So you're going to have to be aggressive and make sure that you're ready to go. As far as sellers are concerned, kind of the same thing. Expect, the buyers are more selective this year. The buyer pool used to be huge about 4 years ago and has shrunk down. A lot of people have been priced out of the market for all the reasons we've been talking about. So the buyer pool is smaller. It's still competitive. But sellers, these buyers are picky. It used to be you just throw a sign in there. You didn't even have to do your laundry, leave the dishes out, no big deal. You're going to have to clean the house up. You're going to have to make it curb friendly. It's going to have to look pretty, because these buyers, they're happy continuing to rent right now until they find the house that they really want, So, from that standpoint, that's how I would advise buyers and sellers in today's market. Both of them need agents, obviously.
Yeah.
And advice.
All right. Well, I think it's challenging. I look at real estate quite frequently, and it seems like 10 years ago the house that I loved was 650, and now the same house is like 1.8. Like it's crazy. The difference.
9% a year for the last 10 years.
And I'm getting old enough now to where I'm like, that's not worth it. I'm still living in those old prices,
Yeah.
And in my own primary home doesn't ever seem to increase in value because nothing around me ever goes up for sale. So I'm on this little street that has basically a dead end, and I don't think anything's been for sale in 5 years. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So I go to Zillow. It doesn't give me a really good number, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right.
Well, that's an interesting conversation, because we're running into the same thing because of the lack of sales in the resale market. Comparables are really hard to find. So appraisers are struggling trying to find enough data and information to be able to provide a lender to make a logical decision on, is this house worth it or not? And of course, in the background, you got the agent screaming, going, I had 5 offers over asking on this thing. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Well, appraisers still have heartburn from the financial crisis. So.
Well, exactly. And they've, there's new, they have guidelines that they have to abide by and they have to follow. So that's, it's not like the appraisers got free willy-nilly to do whatever they want to do. They've got really, really tight restrictions on what they can and cannot use in their reports. So they're kind of, their hands are tied. But yeah, that's an interesting, scenario. We were having a hard time with just having enough data to be able to justify prices.
Yeah, it's almost like if you're selling, you almost got to be moving out, like out of the area, to really capitalize on it. Because most people will tell me, and when I retire, I'm going to downsize my house, and I have to tell them, like, you can downsize the square footage that you want to maintain, but you're not going to get a cheaper house. If you're selling your house in $750 to $1 million, and you're going to move somewhere to smaller, and you want quality and a finished product, it's going to be about the same price. And that's what
right.
People are understanding. Even these 55 plus communities are pretty expensive.
They're very expensive. Now, there's some advantages and amenities that they wrap up into that.
You're buying a lifestyle for sure. If you can find a 55 plus that has good quality build, that's even more expensive. But typically they're lower quality builds, and but you're buying the easy button, right?
Yeah, you are. But no, we have that conversation almost every day with folks. Everybody's got this, I'm going to sell the big house, and I want, I need to find something for $300,000, and I want all of these things and amenities, and I'm like, okay, you're at 650 right now. What you're talking about, sure, 650? Yeah. You got to be kidding me! And I'm like, no, I'm not. Nope, not kidding you.
They aren't living in the realtor apps. Look at the realtor apps. Yeah, it's hard. Well, Tom, I guess we'll kind of wrap up here. Tell us how to get a hold of you if we're buying or selling a house. How do we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website, links, we're on all the social medias and all the popular platforms out there. Our website is www.townrg.com. And from there, you can find the links. I think if you go in and you search at Your Town's Realtor, you'll be able to find us all over the place as well. Instagram, YouTube, we got a pretty good following with YouTube now. Do a lot of video content with information and helpful content about the local area. But that's how you reach us.
All right, Tom. Thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Have a good one. Thanks, Casey.
Thanks for listening to a Wiser Retirement podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you don't miss any new episodes. We'd also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, head to wiserinvestor.com and reach out.
This episode was produced by Edward Resendez.
This podcast is strictly for informational purposes only and is not to be considered as investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any financial products, securities, digital assets, or any other investment vehicles, or a basis to make any financial decisions. Wiser Wealth Management Incorporated is a registered investment advisor with the SEC. The host and/or guest may personally own securities, digital assets, or other investment vehicles mentioned on this podcast. Neither the host nor guest of the show are compensated for their participation, and no referral fees are paid to or received by any host or guest for clients, listeners, or similar interests. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, insurance professional, and/or legal professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.